Recently, a friend of mine reached out to me. He said, Ali, man, you gotta check out this new documentary they did on Kenny G. And I was like, really? Come on. He was like, no, you really have to check it out. Before I get into that, spoiler, alert. I can't even say that. That's tricky. So what I gathered out of this documentary is obviously there's a whole lot of disdain by the jazz community saying all of this, like he can't play, he doesn't know changes, he's just sad. And after watching this documentary, I actually have a lot more respect for Kenny G. You know, he comes from Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. He comes from a working class family. He's diligent cat. He could read. He was very focused in whatever it is that he does. Hell of a work ethic. He went to school for accounting because he didn't think he was going to make it as a musician. But what I find most interesting about him is that he was very methodical about his approach towards music. In an interview, he states,
jazz sound, but it's the technique of it. The John Coltrane and the Charlie Parker, I mean, their technique was phenomenal. But that music was never heartfelt for me.
I'm not surprised about that at all. But at the same time, it lays the foundation of where he's coming from musically. One of his major influences is Grover Washington Jr.
Every night, I put on Inner City Blues, and I would go to sleep to that record. So I tried to become the white Grover Washington Jr.
He captured the soulful veneer, but not the essence of where the soul comes from. He was initially marketed to the black community.
By the way, have you ever seen the single for Hi, How You Doing? The single shows a silhouette of a guy. You can't tell whether he's white or black. At that time, the most success we have is on black radio. And they wanted to make sure that people didn't know I was white. Like, you ever seen the cover of G-Force? Same thing.
I'm not surprised about that at all.
I had written a whole bunch of instrumentals. So I sent them to the guys at Artista Records. Yeah, these are all right, but we're looking for songs that the 15-year-old kids in the ghetto can groove to.
Presenting artists is all about business. They're not necessarily worried about just selling you music. They're trying to sell you anything. So once they can get you hooked via the music, they can present you or sell you whatever's going to make them the most money. So I'm not surprised about that at all. However, as they went on, and with his leap of faith on the Tonight Show,
they come on the door and, hey, Johnny's running late tonight. Sorry, got to cut you down to only one song, so come out and do your single. I said, okay, cool. Door closes, I looked at the guys, I go, we're playing Songbird. I wanted that to be heard, not the single that the record company came up with.
I give him credit for sticking to his guns of saying, I want to do this, and this is the kind of music that I want to do and present. And at the same time, record labels, once they saw that was popular, they created another label or branding called Smooth Jazz, which was basically kind of easy listening instrumental music. But the labeling of jazz with that kind of made all of the jazz people go buck wild and crazy.
Sometimes you say the word jazz and people think of some of the worst music on earth, like, for instance, Kenny G.
I completely resonate where Pat Metheny is coming from if you're someone who grew up in the tradition of jazz music, or what we know as jazz music. If you're talking to another jazz musician or somebody that was playing jazz, that would obviously resonate. In this particular case, you're talking about someone who is like non-binary with jazz. They don't play jazz. They don't consider themselves a jazz musician. So all of what he said actually doesn't apply to him. So Kenny G, in a certain sense, has the right to do whatever he wants to do. It doesn't have to vibe with you or be in the tradition of jazz. And him collaborating with Louis Armstrong, because he's an instrumentalist and has a lot of popularity, yeah, that stings for somebody who holds Louis Armstrong's work and his contributions to jazz music on a very high level. Yes, at the same time, if you're a record label and you're popular and you can sell more records by attaching yourself to Louis Armstrong or doing a duet that doesn't really mean anything, then in it's business, then it doesn't really matter. So I think there's two things going on. One is that, yes, if you're a jazz musician and you did that, that's not so cool. But if you're not and you don't really care, you don't have any scruples, then it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, none of this stuff only matters to you, the individual. So I give a lot of credit and respect to him for taking the beating by the jazz police for so many years. And from a musical business standpoint, him creating friction or rift with the jazz community only gives him more attention and more support in an interesting way. Kenny G shares a very interesting point in this documentary.
When you love a piece of music, you're basically exposing something about you. I like this, don't you? No, I hate that. They're basically saying to you, they hate something about you. It's good, it's no good, it's good, it's no good. But you're basically saying you're good, you're no good, you're good, you're no good. People fight for their own self-worth.
So his music and where he's coming from on that level is about acceptance. Even though it might not be something that resonates with you totally, his energy is always positive. So I look at that and I hold that in very high esteem. To do that, especially for somebody who is deemed a smooth jazz artist, and the flack that he's received, he still continues to put out the music that resonates with him. When people point fingers at Kenny G's music and say it's not this and it's not that, and they ridicule people like, you're stupid for liking that, you're at the same time condemning yourself to those people who don't like jazz. And obviously there are a lot more people that like Kenny G's music. Unfortunately, the least you know about jazz, the more you like Kenny G. And for all of the people that like Kenny G, that just shows you how few people like jazz. There's music that comes out all the time. There's music that came out today that is not representative of the quote unquote jazz moniker or label. And so if that could come out, why are we talking about Kenny G? I mean, I think some of Kenny G's melodies are better than some of the melodies they play out here today. It's accessible. As an artist, you want your art to be accessible to a certain degree. That doesn't mean you sell out. That doesn't mean you're doing gimmicks and all of that. It just means, is your art form cohesive and can you deliver it in the best way that you can do? And if your music is not accessible and you're playing wild stuff, don't get upset because someone else is playing music that is accessible and it's music that resonates with people or more people. In closing, Kenny G's music is unique to what his vision is and where he's coming from, and it's sincere. And I would put a message out to all of my jazz community. Stay focused on what it is that you're doing and be sincere to whatever it is that you're doing and do it to the deepest and highest level. We don't need to point fingers.
And I know what you're going to say, but Ali, you're calling out people in your other videos. But that's not what I'm doing. At the beginning of the video, it states, I share informed musical perspectives, provide feedback, and spontaneous reactions to the what? The music. I would never attack anyone personally.
We just need to be the best us we can be. That's all for now. And as always, I'll see you at the gig.